Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 6 about interest groups and political parties, and it's Lesson 6 about inside lobbying. In this lesson, you'll learn about what lobbying means, you'll learn about the revolving door, about expert information, and about lobbying and lying. In this lesson and the next several lessons, we'll learn about the various methods that are used by interest groups to accomplish their purpose of putting pressure on government to do things for them. In this lesson, we'll be talking about the particular method that we call inside lobbying. As we discuss inside lobbying, we're going to talk about 4 different aspects of it. The first of those aspects is the person-to-person nature of inside lobbying. To understand what this is, we first need to define some terms. Lobbying is a phrase that I've already used, that perhaps you've heard before in discussions about how American government works. Lobbying refers to the activities that groups undertake to try to influence public officials to get whatever policy is that they want. The term comes from an actual physical part of a building, the lobby. Now think about how governments generally work. You've got government officials that have been elected or appointed or whatever it is, that when they're doing their day-to-day business, they're isolated from the public. They're in their chambers or their meeting rooms or their halls or whatever it is, wherever they meet and assemble to do their work together. In those places, members of the general public don't have a chance to grab them and talk to them. But as they leave those places, they will generally pass through some public part of a building called a lobby. Here's an example from the Illinois state government building, the capital of Illinois is what I wanted to say, where the Senate is for the state of Illinois. And here's an actual lobby outside the Senate chamber. Well, this is the kind of place that gave rise to the word lobbying, because as members of government pass through areas like this, in whatever government building they're in, there's an opportunity for people to approach them and try to talk to them. The people who would do this with a specific purpose of trying to influence the government official to do something then became known long ago as lobbyists. They were the people waiting out in the lobby to try to grab members of parliament or members of Congress or whatever it was and talk to them to try to persuade them to do things. The actions of these lobbyists then became known as lobbying. So that's what lobbying is really about. That's what the word originally meant, was the actions of the people standing out there in the lobby who grab the members of government as they're trying to get home and try to talk to them about the policies that are preferred by the lobbyists. In modern American government, that term lobbyist, though, has taken on a very specific meaning. It's assigned to those people who are paid to lobby, usually on behalf of some interest group. So there's an interest group that is an organized group of people with a common interest who then want to pressure government to do things, and they hire somebody to then be the person who actually approaches the government officials to try to talk them into doing things for them. This inside lobbying, then, is what we're talking about. Now, it's called inside lobbying because there's another form called outside lobbying, which we'll be talking about in the next lesson. But notice that the kind of lobbying we're talking about to this point is very much about person-to-person interactions. It's where the lobbyist grabs the member of government as they're passing through the lobby and talks to them, tries to persuade them to do things. Now, the way things have evolved, most lobbyists aren't grabbing the members of government out in the hallway anymore, trying to talk to them. They'll get appointments, they'll nurture relationships in some other way at cocktail parties, dinners, they'll get introduced by other people. They'll find some other way to make contact. But whether they're just hanging out in the lobby waiting to grab somebody or they've got an appointment to come to the congressman's office, it's all the same. They're the person who's trying to get the ear of this government official to then persuade them to do something. And if they're officially a lobbyist, they're being paid by somebody to do it. The next feature of inside lobbying that we need to discuss is the revolving door. Now, to understand what this is alluding to, we have to think about what sort of people we're going to be hired to be lobbyists. They're going to be people who, for some reason, can get access to politicians easier than others would. And then when they have that access, they're going to be able to convince the politicians easier than others to do what their interest groups wants. So those are the talents, the abilities that you're looking for in a lobbyist if you want to hire them. They can actually get in to see the politician, and then once they get in, the politician's going to listen to them. Well, what sort of people are going to be most likely able to do those things? It's going to be a former politician or a former government official, somebody who's already been involved in the mechanisms of government and understands how they work, but additionally has already built personal relationships with the people in government. The example here presented on this slide is a man named Trent Lott. He used to be the majority leader of the United States Senate. Now, he's one of the highest paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. He is so well compensated for his lobbying efforts because he knows everybody in the Senate. When he knocks on their doors, they don't just see a lobbyist, they see an old friend and acquaintance who they're happy to talk to. Being able to get that access and to have credibility with the people that he talks to is something that he gets paid very, very well for having. So these are the kind of people that interest groups want to hire. People who can get access and convince the people when they get in, and the people who are best suited to that are former politicians and government officials. This then leads us to the idea of the revolving door. It's the notion that when people, for one reason or another, no longer have a job in government, they simply go out of the door of the government building, while outside, grab a job as a lobbyist, and go right back in. The door doesn't even stop turning. They move through it so quickly. Interest groups are just out there waiting to pay former members of government to work for them because they understand these people will have access and they'll have relationships that they can capitalize on to convince members of government to do what the interest group wants. And so this common practice of government officials leaving their jobs, perhaps because they decided to retire, or perhaps they were voted out of office, or whatever it may be, this practice of them leaving their government jobs, immediately grabbing a job as a lobbyist, and then heading right back into the same buildings that they just came out of, is become known as the revolving door. The third feature of inside lobbying to discuss is the idea of expert information. Politicians are not experts on everything that comes before them. There will be lots of bills that will be proposed that will come up for votes that members of Congress have no idea whether they're good ideas or not. What I'm presenting here on this slide is milk cows. So let's imagine that a law is proposed to regulate what hormones can be injected into milk cows. Now, it's become a common practice in modern agriculture to inject animals who are being used in agriculture with various things such as antibiotics, hormones, things like that, to make them healthier and more productive and make the farmers more money. But there are some people that have concerns about this, that they think it may in some way make the food not as good of quality. So let's say there's a law that's been proposed to try to regulate what hormones can be injected. And you're a member of Congress and you have no clue whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. Who are you going to ask about it? Well, certainly one group that you could ask about it would be the Dairy Farmers of America. It's an interest group representing the people who are actually working with the cows. And they could come in and supply information for you, expert information that you would otherwise not know about exactly what these hormones do, the effects they have on the cows, what they do to the economic viability of the dairy industry, things like that. and you're going to rely on that information. Now, you may be wondering, but wait a minute, that only gives them one side of the story. They're finding out what the dairy farmers think about injecting hormones. What about the people who are critics of it? Shouldn't they know what they think also? And absolutely, they can find out that too, because the people who are opposing this particular bill probably have their own interest groups, and they have their own lobbyists. And so the members of government can listen to the lobbyists from both sides of the issue, and in that way become educated about it. And they have come to rely upon these interest groups educating them, giving them expert information that they otherwise would not have. And the expert information isn't just about the factual nature of whatever the issue is, but it's also political information, such as if you vote against this, then every dairy farmer and his family in America will then vote against you when you run for office next time, that sort of thing. Or these groups will no longer donate money to your campaign, etc. This is information that politicians gather as they make their decisions, and they get a lot of it from interest groups. This then brings us to our fourth feature of inside lobbying, which is that the people involved in it actually have an incentive not to lie. The reason is that if lobbyists are caught lying, if they go around telling politicians things that aren't true, and the politicians then find out that they've been lied to, they won't want to talk to that person again. But remember, why did that person get that high-paying job in the first place? They got it because they could get access. They're the kind of person, when they go knock on the door, rather than the member of Congress not knowing who they are, not wanting anything to do with them, instead it's like, oh, hi, Bob, the ex-senator that they all know. That's why he got the job, is because doors will be opened for him. Well, if people find out that he's a liar, that just makes stuff up, they're no longer going to want to open doors for him. And once the members of government don't open doors for him, he's lost his value to the interest groups that would hire him. And when he loses his value by losing his access, then he loses his job. So if he wants to make money, he's got to make sure that the people he talks to trust him and know that he's not going to lie to them. So there's actually an incentive for lobbyists to tell the truth. Now, lobbyists oftentimes get horrible reputations. And one of the reputations they have is that they go around and just lie to everybody. That is probably not really true, for the reason just explained. Now, they may be corrupt and awful for some other reasons, but probably not this one. Now let's review what we learned in this lesson. What is lobbying? Is it trying to avoid government? Is it trying to formulate solutions? Is it trying out new ideas? Or is it trying to influence government to do something you want? It's trying to influence government. What is the revolving door? Is it lobbyists becoming politicians? Or politicians becoming lobbyists? Or is it bills that fail to pass? Or is it the same problems coming up every year? The revolving door refers to politicians becoming lobbyists. What can lobbyists supply politicians? Do they give them free houses? Do they guarantee that they'll win elections? Do they give them extra income? Or do they provide them with expert information? Lobbyists give politicians information. Why don't lobbyists just lie to politicians? Is it because they would lose access to them? Is it because they'd go to jail? Is it because all they say is just an opinion anyway? Or is it that they all just lie freely? Lobbyists don't lie because they would then lose access. That does it for this lesson. The next lesson from Unit 6 will be Lesson 7 about outside lobbying.